order. There, roll call shows all councilors are present. And before we get into the agenda, I'd just like to say that after looking over the agenda and the workshop and an executive session, I became concerned about the length of our stay tonight. I don't want us to rush through either our regular business or the workshop. So I'm going to take a look at the clock as we wind down our regular business and make a decision as to whether we're going to continue with the workshop or postpone it. I just talked with Sophie there. There is an open night in June, which we could easily slide it into. But let's see how long our regular meeting takes and make a decision at the end of our regular meeting. So having said that, is there any review of the agenda? Any additions or deletions? Nothing from the manager? All set? Approval of the minutes of March 21st, April 11th, and April 25th. Motion to approve, please.
Move approval.
Moved by Cheryl, second by Megan. Any questions, additions, deletions, omissions? Have such good minutes, it's amazing. All those in favor, please signify. And none opposed, 7-0. Moving on to public hearings. Public hearing A, to consider a Class 1 malt liquor, wine, and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victuals license for Orono Football Pub Company, LLC, doing business as the Common Loon, 36 to 38 Main Street in Orono.
I'm Patrick Geskey, Code Enforcement Officer, and I will be making recommendations based off police, fire, and the town clerk. And with this first one, all inspections have been completed, and we are recommending approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Open a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public? Bill, I assume you're out there in space somewhere.
I am, and I don't see anybody with their hand raised at this time.
Any comments from councilors? All right, we'll move on to public hearing B, to consider a Class 4 tavern liquor license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victuals license for Timothy Gowan, doing business as Black Bear Brewery, 19 Mill Street, Orono, Suite 4.
And staff has completed all the inspections and review and is recommending approval.
Do we have any public comments on this, Bill?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to public hearing C, to consider a Class 11 malt liquor, wine, and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victuals license for Marg's Mex Orono, LLC, doing business as Margarita's Mexican Restaurant, 15 Mill Street.
Staff has completed all inspections, but we are asking for a conditional. Their 5-year internal sprinkler system has to be inspected. We were told it was going to be on Friday, but I haven't heard back. So we're asking for a conditional until I hear back from them.
Thank you, Patrick. Any public comments for or against this license?
Nothing online.
Ma'am? So Sophie will amend that, or should we take it off the?
It's already conditioned on consent.
Thank you so much. Public hearing B, to consider a Class 1 malt liquor, wine, and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, entertainment, and victuals license for the Black Bear's Den Memorial Union, University of Maine.
And staff has completed all inspections and is asking for approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Any public comments for or against the issuing of this license?
Nothing online.
Thank you again. We'll close public hearing B. Move on to public hearing E, to consider a Class 1 malt liquor, wine, and spirits license, special amusement permit for music, dancing, and entertainment, and victuals license for Wells Catering, University of Maine.
and staff has completed all inspections and is asking for approval on this as well.
Staff has been busy. Any public comments on the issuing of this license?
Nothing online.
Thank you again. We'll close public hearing E, move on to public hearing F to consider an amendment to the Town of Orono Ordinances, Chapter 18, Land Use, Section 18-31, definitions to create a definition for fraternity and sorority houses. That's Kyle.
Hi, everyone, Kyle Drexler, town planner. So this ordinance amendment, land use ordinance amendment came to council committee. It's a pretty brief amendment that would really is aimed at allowing what's been an existing practice in the town before. The council committee referred it to the planning board for a public hearing. That public hearing happened. Just to briefly summarize, again, we have a land use for fraternity and sorority houses. It's an allowed use in the university zone. However, there is no actual definition in the land use ordinance for the use. So the ordinance amendment would define fraternity and sorority house. The first sentence there is sort of the typical definition of what you would think of for that use. The second sentence is allowing the spaces when they're not being occupied during the school year, by the fraternities or sororities. It allows the University of Maine, when they're hosting or sponsoring events or programs, to have other groups of people taking parts in those events and programs to use the fraternity and sorority spaces, for those groups. But what that does is it keeps it still labeled under that fraternity sorority use. So you don't run into any problems where all of a sudden they might be labeled as a rooming house or some other land use that would create a different set of review criteria in the ordinance. At the planning board public hearing, there were no public comments. The planning board was largely in favor of the amendment. There was really one comment that the council may or may not be interested in looking into. In the second sentence, it says, when the University of Maine is not in session, the building may also be used to provide lodging facilities for groups of people taking part in university-sponsored events or programs, so long as the group serves a common interest. The planning board was, a few members were somewhat interested in clarifying that the common interest is something approved by the university. Staff kind of seemed to think that that was already covered under the fact that the event or program itself was university sponsored. So if the event or program was university sponsored, then that would stand to reason that the group taking part in it was also approved by the university. But the board, thought that it could be worthwhile just to further clarify it and that it wouldn't really create any issues there. But that was the only really topic of discussion on it. Other than that, I think it was ready to come back to council for a public hearing. And then if it moves on with no changes or just that one amendment, I would be ready to go to adoption at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Kyle. Do we have any public comments on this item, Bill?
Nobody has their hand raised.
Council, any comments from you folks?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This may have been addressed at planning committee. It has been the practice. I've been out of the university for many years, but it was the practice at one point that it was not only groups that rented rooms from fraternities, but also individuals who were taking summer classes. And so I wonder if that is still the practice. And if so, if our definition should say something like for individuals or groups of people.
So this is where we walk into the fire marshal's definition of a rooming house, which would then subject it to a different degree. There, the entire discussion that we had with the fraternities and others has been around groups of people. Not saying, so like a professor could arrange for their summer classes to have people utilize space in a fraternity, that they would sign off on the agreement. Student Life could do the same. The idea that we're trying to get away from is an individual renting an individual room, because that circumvents a lot of university protections that the town would have. But this is yours. This is not mine.
I guess it's not even a concern. It's a question that I had, was the renting of individual rooms by fraternities an ongoing practice? And if so, is that of particular concern to the town or the university?
So when we talked with folks at the university and the fraternities, I mean, we sat in a big room with representatives from all the fraternities. And what we were told is that currently there was a practice of letting of individual rooms throughout the school year as well. We explained all the reasons why that was really not part of the ordinance and why that the fire marshal's office wouldn't look at it the same way. Therefore, we wouldn't look at it the same way. And they all agreed that what they were doing could be managed within this ordinance change.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? I see.
The addition of the sentence about, university approval for the event, do you think that would add a layer of like permissions and bureaucracy needed at the university level, or?
So the planning board wasn't looking for an actual, like, an approval process, or a permit or anything like that. It would read something like, people taking part in university-sponsored events or programs, so long as the group serves a common interest approved by the university. So they're already there for a university-sponsored event. It would just be a matter of really the university acknowledging that the group itself was actually taking part in that event. So I think that was already the intent of the ordinance. So I don't necessarily think it's necessary, but at the same time, if it was added, I don't think it adds any extra level of difficulty. I don't think it changes the process really at all.
I'd say it feels unnecessary to me.
It feels unnecessary to me as
To
well,
add
but to add it, but I don't have a strong, as long as it's not creating like hoops that are creating paperwork for real people, I don't have a strong feeling against it.
Yeah, and I don't think the planning board's initial, I think, thought process was, okay, you have a university sponsored event, okay, like a main day or football game or something like that, and some random group of, a collective group of people just comes and stays in a fraternity. So the event itself is sponsored by the university, but the group is just, a bunch of, friends or whoever. Whereas the intent of the ordinance and the practice that's been passed is for, it could be a group of students or a group of whoever coming to the university specifically to take part in the event. So that's where the conversation sort of originated.
Are we okay with the language as it is presently written?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we're ready to move on and see that again at our next meeting for approval.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Thanks.
And finally, public hearing G, to consider amendment of the Town of Orono Ordinances, Chapter 20, Law Enforcement, to amend standards for recovery of costs for police services and disorderly property.
Okay. So as this was an ordinance amendment proposed for the law enforcement chapter, not the land use chapter, it didn't have to go to planning board for public hearing. So this would be the first and only public hearing through the council. But we did talk at length I think about this through the council committee process. The idea here was the existing articles that are gone over in the amendment, Articles 2 and 3 in Chapter 20. Article 2 talking about recovery costs for police services at large events, and Article 3 talking about disorderly properties. The comp plan had recommended some amendments and changes to this ordinance language to really increase the effectiveness and efficiency of them, to take away some of the parts of it that weren't as necessary or were maybe more complicated than necessary, and really focus on police being able to respond more effectively and in a more timely manner. So Article 2, the recovery of costs at large events, is really aimed at more of the operational side of things. If you know, and the definition of what's considered a large event as part of this was changed from 5 to 20 to really capture more of those larger scale events, you know, as the article is titled. You know, but it's aimed at capturing that operational side of things where police are responding and they have to respond multiple times. You know, and that puts a burden on the service. Article 3 with the disorderly properties, there was more language kind of changed in that article than in the first one. The general idea was to, you know, how that changed from what was originally there was to split disorderly properties into two types. You have your smaller scale disorderly activities and your larger scale. The idea with the smaller sorts of disorderly activities, you know, with smaller gatherings, people under 20 people, is to kind of go through a few step process where, you know, first time would be a warning, second time is more of a sit down meeting with police, any relevant town staff, and the parties involved in the disorderly activity. And then step 3 would finally be where a remediation agreement and fines could come into play. You know, if you have the larger scale disorderly property, it would jump right to the kind of third option there with the remediation agreement and fines being required. The town did meet with a group of local landlords a couple times throughout the process to kind of go over the ordinance to see if there were any glaring red flags or just, you know, how some of that would be taken. I thought the meetings were pretty good. There was good feedback. Yeah, I think in general, the idea is that, you know, larger scale properties, you know, the more units you have on a single property, the greater potential impact there is on the surrounding area. So instead of, you know, we've talked about looking at a per unit versus per lot sort of difference. This ordinance looks at the lot comprised of all units. You know, a single family home with one instance shouldn't necessarily be treated the same way as a property with 50 or 100 units, all of which go through, you know, that same sort of disorderly activity. So those are some of the goals of the ordinance amendment. Yeah, if there's any other specific questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Let's see if there are any public comments first, then we'll go to councilors.
Nothing online.
Thank you, Bill. Questions, comments from council members? We all set?
Can I just clarify? So we would be voting to adopt these ordinance changes tonight?
No.
No, okay, thank you. I sort of heard that this hadn't gone through committee and got a little bit alarmed.
No,
Okay, so we put initial eyes on this and are moving.
So it has
What is the
gone,
process
it
for
has
that?
gone through council committee.
Okay.
This is the public hearing.
Mhm.
Unlike the land use ordinance amendments, it doesn't have to go to the planning board for a public
Okay.
hearing, but the adoption would still be next month.
Mhm.
Okay. If there are no further questions on this item, we will move on to acknowledgements by council members. Let's begin with Jeff. Do you have any acknowledgements tonight?
None at this time, thank you.
Megan?
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge staff, public safety staff for surviving another main day. Good job, folks. It would seem like some low-key shenanigans and maybe a couple of serious incidents, but in general, I didn't get the onslaught of complaints from people who know I'm on council like I normally do. So that, for me, seems like it was an excellent job. No, but in all seriousness, it's always a challenging day, and I think, it was handled really smoothly as per usual. So that is kudos to you folks. And also, I want to just give a nod to, I know that Public Works is going to be going into a whole new season with a whole new list of chores. So if folks out there in the public are saying, well, like, when's this going to happen? When's that? They're on it. They're very busy in this one little moment of the spring. So, and don't forget that dump day is coming up, right? Is that the 14th, 15th, that weekend? Yeah. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Always a fun time.
So you have to have your sticker.
Right.
You have to have a sticker in order to be able to access the dump, but we don't take tickets.
So no charge.
And that's all I've got.
Cheryl.
I just wanted to say thank you to the folks that are doing our gardens around town, because those are always beautiful, and congrats to the class of 2022 who had a chance to march this year at the university. And I have a couple of friends who got a chance to march this year for the first, I think it's their first in-person graduation in 3 years. So congratulations.
Thank you. Leo?
I have a pass-through acknowledgement. My neighbor, Ray Thomas, flagged me down regarding the flags, actually. That we put up. So he was very appreciative as a vet, having those put up. So he wanted to pass that along. So it's a pass-through.
Well, I'm gonna pass through and say, while the town is part of that equation, the other half of that equation is University of Maine Facilities Management. They actually donate their time and their equipment to make that happen.
And he had mentioned that because he worked up there and said, we used to do that. I don't know if we still do. So I can let him know.
This
that they
is
did.
just year number 2, so.
So they've used it maybe for the banners or
Yeah.
whatever they've used in the past. Yeah.
Well, I'll acknowledge University of Maine students who did service projects on Maine Day. There were, I think, over 1,500 students engaged in that, and students involved with the Black Bear Exchange packed over 50,000 meals for people who could use meals. So really massive volunteer effort.
And I would actually just echo, what Cheryl brought up, just all the gardening is looking really beautiful. Appreciate it. It's brightening up my days.
I just ditto the comment about public safety in Maine Day. I think that was a great response. The chief is here to acknowledge that. I understand that we were complimented in our planning and organization by the state police lieutenant who was in charge of the state police detail that was here. So it's nice to get that kind of positive feedback from our department heads. And I would also like to acknowledge, sadly, the passing of Evan Osgood, a longtime Orono resident, professor of entomology for many years at the university, very involved in community activity, and the parent of a number of Orono High School graduates, one of whom lives in our community and is a physician at Northern Lights. Unfinished business. We have no unfinished business, so we will move on to the consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Cheryl moved and Sonia second.
Before we vote, I'd just like to say that I will be abstaining from voting on the consent agenda because my husband's business license is on it. But I also do want to acknowledge all the folks who are being nominated to boards and volunteering their time for the town, which are included on the consent agenda. But I will be abstaining, not because I don't love these people, but it would be not ethical for me to.
Thank you for mentioning that. Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your hand. And we have 6 in favor and 1 abstention. Okay, now I gotta go on to another page. New business. Order 22-87. Order approving the zone change of map 27-2 lots 118, 119, 121, 39 Park Street, Orono Public Library, 10 Birch Street Senior Center, and related parking lots from medium density residential to village commercial. This is an item that we have dealt with before and talked about several times, and well, Kyle,
Yeah.
have something to say on it.
Yeah, so this is now up for adoption. This zone change has gone through planning board public hearing as well as council public hearing. I don't believe there were any concerns at either of those meetings. This is not really an ordinance amendment as far as language is concerned. This would be a change made to the actual townwide zoning map. If it were to be adopted, we would have a new updated map created, and that would then be signed by the town clerk and council chair. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer, but
So before-
I move
just-
approval.
Thank you. Before we have any questions, let's get a motion on the floor.
Second.
And a second, so Cheryl and me. Comments, questions? Everybody pretty clear on this?
Yes.
Okay. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Order 22-88. Order approving the purchase of a camera system for the public interview room, police interview room, I'm sorry, from Motorola Solutions of Allen, Texas, in an amount not to exceed $25,600 with funds drawn from the Police Asset Forfeiture Fund.
So I'm gonna start.
Motion to approve, please.
Move.
Moved by Megan, second by Cheryl. There.
So I'm gonna start and then hand it over to our chief, but the police interview rooms camera system is currently not working. It's important that it works. Bell and Dan have been working with Motorola Communication Systems to replace the camera. It's part of a larger system. It's set up to immediately begin recording once you flip the light on, and being in that room, there are no windows, so you're going to turn a light on to be in the room. It immediately starts a camera going. So we have documentation of exactly what is said and what is done in that room. And that's important for two reasons. The first is evidentiary goes to the DA's office if we're putting a case together. Actually, three reasons. Second is accountability in terms of what officers say and do in that room. And the third is part of our accreditation process. We are always looking at video on the road, in the interview room, in the intoxilizer room, to ensure that officers are following standard operating procedures to be able to flag if there are elements that need to be remediated as part of our supervisory process. We have this quote. However, we are trying to get an add to this quote that would also allow us to put in the same kind of camera system or stretch the camera system into our evidence room. There are, and there have been, evidence room issues with other departments in the past. As part of accreditation, we're supposed to have very tight security. We'd like to get that set up the same way. So you flip the switch, somebody goes into that room, Dan would be able to have a documentation of what has happened in that room. Where unfortunately, Motorola is being very slow in getting us the additional quote. So we're here today with what we know, which is for the interview room. This covers the hardware that is needed, the camera system upgrade, and a 5-year subscription to the streaming service that holds the information in a secure way. So this isn't just some camera system. This is a camera system that has gotten the approval of the access integrity folks and meets accreditation standards. So that is what I know. I also know, and you can talk to Dan about the details. But I also know what we're asking for is the state asset forfeiture account currently has a balance of $59,152.96. We're suggesting that we take the $25,600 out of that account. Council has historically used that account for 2 reasons or 3 reasons: officer safety, officer accountability, and our efforts to target OUI and other high-risk activity in Orono for public safety. So has to be used for law enforcement. Those are the 3 priorities that council has had in the past.
Sophie, just to be clear, we're only dealing at this point with the interview room. If you have a quote for the evidence room, it'll come back to us at another time. I think it's an excellent idea to look at that evidence room. Some of you can remember one of our neighboring communities had problems in their evidence room, and it was quite a big deal.
And I would have brought it to you as just an add-on, like a higher amount not to exceed, but it's gonna be anywhere from probably 5,000 to 12,000, and that seemed like a very big swing, too much to just come get blanket approval for.
Chief, any comments from you, sir?
Yeah, so I think Dan Merrill, Deputy Police Chief. I think Sophie covered most of it pretty well. The system in general is it'll be 2 camera heads. There's one dome style that's like you'd see in every movie, a Miami Vice movie or whatever, where you have the dome camera and it's got an optic in it. It's not hidden. And then there's one that's a covert camera that would be in a different place in the interview room. That just helps us get 2 different perspectives of what's going on so that you don't just have one single camera in there. So it's 2 cameras, light switch activated, like she said. We already have the technology in place because we had it in a former system where when the light comes on, there's actually a green light that comes on outside our interview room too. So that when we have employees coming in and things too, they know what an interview is going on and they know to be quiet. In theory, they know to be quiet and, you know, come in and move about politely. And as she spoke about it, we paid for a 5-year subscription to the Command Central cloud-based evidence system, which integrates with a system that the council previously approved for FY22 for our Motorola solutions, the WatchGuard and body camera system that you guys voted on. So we haven't received yet because of COVID and chips and technology is just not here. So when Bell and I were crafting this need for a new interview room system, we immediately reached out to Motorola because we figured that it would just make us a one-stop shop and all our evidence and media could be in one place. And it would make sense. If I have to go pull video for anything from a traffic stop all the way through an in-talks, I could just go to one server that's stored on the cloud and it would be a very reliable system. The struggle I have right now is my system is not reliable. I don't have a way to tell real time when my interview room system is working, which is a struggle. It's not good. That's not something that we would like. So we're looking for something much more efficient. Those are the high points I have. Anybody have any questions?
Questions from council?
When can they deliver it?
Don't know. I wish I knew. Like I said, we got approved. So I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm really not. It's just July 1 for FY22, we'd ordered a full complement of 17 body cameras and 6 cruiser cameras. And I have none of them. I have nothing. And I call them and they say COVID, infrastructure, shipping delays, and that's all they can tell me. So I'd like to tell you I know, but I don't.
So can I just clarify? You ordered them. You don't have any of the new ones.
Right,
But we
yes,
haven't-
yes, we have the
unlike-
previous system.
Unlike other departments in the region,
Yes,
we have had
yes.
active body cam, cruiser cams for patrol
Yes.
vehicles and individuals for years.
So the system we're on right now is just, it's all USB driven. So in our cruisers, you go out and you capture all the video, it's on a USB. We have to bring that USB inside, plug it in, and then it uploads to our server that's here. So we have 11 terabyte server here. With this new system that's coming in, that's already been spent and paid for, it's all Wi-Fi upload. So I actually do have, the only thing I have is the antenna in my office. They sent me an antenna, which does me really no good, but I have an antenna so that it could be mounted to the outside of the building.
We're getting there. We have an antenna.
You know, I have an antenna that will be mounted to the outside of the building. And then as soon as our cruisers pull up, or as soon as anybody comes into the police department, their media automatically will get grabbed up into the cloud. So it'll be a super efficient system. I'm really excited about it when we can get it. It'll be really good.
Other questions or comments?
Just to sort
Sure.
of play devil's advocate, I'm curious, I mean, if you're already wearing body cams, presumably are you wearing those too if you're interviewing someone and is, I don't know, $26,000 seems to me, I'm new here, but it seems like, wow, a non-trivial extra expense if we are already capturing camera footage of what's going on. That's like more than I make in a year.
I think one of the big points to that is the 2 camera points that I can get.
Mhm.
So I can get 2 different perspectives, which is important. If you're doing a fluid investigation, or if I'm doing an intoxilizer test for somebody, if I just have the bubble camera over somebody's head, I might not be able to see if they stick anything in their mouth or if they bring anything up, which is very important in our court cases. So having 2 camera heads helps eliminate some of those arguments. And if I just utilize, again, if I just utilize my body cameras in there, I'm only going to capture 1 event. And the body cameras, while new, still aren't going to have the longevity I don't think that this system could have. It's a best practice. It
Yeah.
really should be had in police departments.
What are other, how commonplace is it? Or is it the case that most interview rooms in the state have camera systems at this point, or are you aware of what is typical?
Yeah, I actually, it's a new policy that actually came out where it's a law that came out January 1st of 2022, where law enforcement agencies are required to record suspects and witnesses in major crimes. So murders, class A, B, and C crimes. So it just says in some capacity. Again, from a liability perspective, I think that having a well-constructed network and ecosystem is only going to help the town eliminate or mitigate some liability in those type of crimes for both the victims and, you know, the people that were interviewing.
I would also just add, as somebody who I serve as the appeal body when the police department gets a complaint and they go through their whole complaint process and the person still isn't satisfied. I serve as the individual that would be the appeal. And that has caused me to get very well acquainted with body cam video and cruiser video. The issue with body cam video is it gives you a really lousy perspective. So your body cam is here. Depending on where the person is sitting and what the person is doing, you may or may not get one. An officer moves like this, you get a lovely picture of over here. You don't know what the officer's arms are doing or what the officer's facial expression is. All the things that when people aren't happy, they're not thinking about what they look like. They're telling me about what the officer is being. And unless it is verbal, I wouldn't see it. So that's.
Yeah, just to the question of what are other departments in Maine doing, I would also just like to point out that we were CALIA accredited when we were one of the only law enforcement agencies in the state, one of the only ones in the state for years. And part of these, now we've switched to the state accreditation, but still the principle of making sure that both witnesses and officers and suspects are all, you know, highly visible, good audio, like that you can see every angle for accountability and for everybody's safety and protection. And it's a best practice, you know, that the town has followed for a lot longer than anyone else in the state was even thinking of doing. And I think a lot of people are getting on board now, but we've been there for a long time. And I think it's a really important practice. And it is expensive, but that's what this particular pool of money that we have is for very specific uses. And I think this is a great use of those funds.
And I just add briefly, I served on a Penobscot County trial jury several years ago.
where there was disagreement from the attorney of the defendant about what was actually happening in the interview room. And that video that that police department had was the key in the resolution of the case. It was very important to the jury. So, other questions, comments? Are we ready for a vote on this item?
One more, sorry to be the squeaky wheel. I'm curious, if the evidence room camera is between $5,000 and $12,000, what's the price differential between that? Is it the multiple camera angles that would be part of the?
So part of what we have to purchase is a user subscription. So what's quoted, what I have quoted right now is just a user subscription for my interview room. So I would have to purchase a separate subscription, I believe. I haven't got them fully quoted yet, but my understanding is I have to have another subscription for that interview room head. I'm not necessarily looking to get two cameras because it's just a U-shaped room. So I think a dome camera will suffice.
Yeah.
But it's technology. I know this is not a cheap quote, but I believe this is a very reasonable and fair priced quote based off, what the industry is proving. And I don't have to go to another vendor. It's gonna fold in very nicely with the several $100,000 we just spent on Motorola solutions for bodying cruiser camera stuff. So that integration will be very important on the user side for the police department.
We all set? Now call for a vote. All those in favor of passing this order? 6 in favor and opposed? Go ahead.
I will abstain.
Okay, 1 abstention. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
As Stan leaves, can I just,
Can Dan leave?
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. I
She's the
would
boss.
also just say that I've heard amazing things about the way Dan and the fire department supported graduation this weekend. For somebody just coming on to the role, Dan and Kevin Searwood both are doing a phenomenal job and very pleased.
No surprise.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I thought Josh got uncomfortable when we did public praise. This is a whole new level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a public safety thing, I think.
I was gonna say, there's a method to my madness.
Uh-huh.
So we'll move on to order 22-89. Order authorizing the town manager to enter into a contract for paving marking services to Lucas Striping LLC of Reedfield in the amount of $29,446 to be drawn from the approved public works operating budget. Motion to approve.
Move approval.
Cheryl,
Second?
and seconded by me. Robert.
Yeah, so on May 4th, we received bids for our pavement marking services. Pavement marking services is all of our painted lines within the urban compact, so essentially everything east of I-95 and any local roads on the west side. That includes the long lines, the symbols, crosswalks, all those types of things that we paint every year. The low bid this year was Lucas Striping of Reedfield for $29,466. They've been our pavement marking contractor for 6 years now, so pretty comfortable with them. They had some supply issues last year, but they've assured me that this year will not be a repeat of last year, so we're recommending to award the contract to Lucas Striping.
Questions for Mr. Yerxa?
I just have the comment that this is a 3-year contract with 1-year extensions, correct? Just a 1 year?
It's a 1-year contract with the option to extend 2 times, so
Here we go.
it can be up to a 3-year contract, but we have the option to choose a new vendor after each year.
How long do the stripings last? Like when we stripe the roads, like a year, 2 years?
No,
No,
well, I mean, it all depends on traffic volume,
yeah,
those, all the factors that we're paying off. Newer pavement actually tends to wear quicker because there's still asphalt that the paint is stuck to instead of stones that are
Yeah.
exposed, so. It varies quite a bit, but it's really kind of related to traffic volumes.
Okay.
But
Do you
they need
budget
to
for
be
it
done.
every year? Do you budget for it every other
Yes,
year?
we
Every
budget
year?
for it every
Every
year.
year, okay.
That's all, like yellow lines, everything?
If we didn't do the yellow lines, so the yellow lines are probably the ones that see the fewest amount of, traffic going over them and things like that. But even those fade by the end of the year. We
Crosswalks are all gone. pretty
Yeah.
much, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Can attest to that.
That's why a few years ago, Rob came to council and council approved putting the signs up at crosswalks, because under state law, you either need the white crosswalk or you need the signs in order to ticket. So we have the signs, the crosswalk painting is to let people know that don't read signs that they can go across.
We have them at every crosswalk.
Every unsignalized crosswalk.
What about the flashing light one? Like, that, is that still up on Park Street?
We've got 5 or 6 of those now.
Is that a state, does the state kick in and do those or something? Because those are very effective. And very good.
Yeah.
Particularly that spot on Park
Mhm.
Street.
Yeah.
Has some meaning to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question, just so we can compare this number as we look at other things in the budget. What was the increase in this contract over the previous contract?
It was about 20, it was about 4,000.
Okay. Yeah.
Increase from last year.
So in line with every other increase you're saying.
Yeah, and I would call this a very reasonable increase. I was expecting more, to be honest with you.
Don't tell them that.
No, not really.
Other questions or comments? Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed, and whatever you can do, Mr. York, to encourage the speedy work to be done would be greatly appreciated. And I know that that's not an easy task. Okay. We can move on to order 22-90. Order authorizing the town manager to allocate $250,000 of the 2020 infrastructure fiber bond proceeds to fund additional expenses related to the Chapel Road, College Heights drainage and road improvement project. This is an interesting one. Motion to approve.
Move approval?
And a second. Second by Rob. This Sophie or is this Rob?
Do you want to start with the need and then I'll talk about the money?
Yeah, so the issue, so when the bond, I kind of got to talk about the money, boss.
Okay. You talk about it. You talk about it.
So the 2020 bond funded 4 separate projects. About $1.1 million was allocated for the North Main Chapel and College Heights project out of the general obligation bond. When the bids came in for the project, the base bid was just a little bit over 1.5 million for the project, which was more than we had allocated for that project within the limits of the bond. So we made some scope changes to reduce the cost. Essentially, we eliminated the base material and fabric that you use to create the structure underneath the pavement of the road. In lieu of fully reconstructing the road, we decided to do what's called a reclaim process. So you basically rotor till the existing pavement that's there with a little bit of new gravel and rock to create a better subsurface, but not great. The difference between a full reconstruction and the scope that we did is on the back end of the lifespan of that project, about 5 to 7 years. That puts that in perspective. So instead of a 15-year road, you have, instead of a 20-year road, you probably have a 15-year road with the existing scope. At the time, funds needed to be allocated to support the fiber optic project. And those funds at $250,000 was allocated to support that project. Since then, the need for those funds for the fiber optic project has gone away because there's been some other funds identified to support the project, which left that $250,000 available to be spent on infrastructure projects because it was part of the general obligation bond, which was dedicated for infrastructure improvement. So when we made this change, I was comfortable with the change, but I didn't like it. The not reconstructing the sub base of the road really is sort of like painting your house, but letting your foundation fall apart. It's a really important part of the project that, given the fact that those funds are available, I feel like it's important to add. Also, being on the project every day, we've seen that the sub base, particularly on Chapel Road, is very poor. It's feet of clay with a little bit of, I guess you'd call it gravel. It's stony, sandy, clay stuff. And then about 3 inches of 50-year-old pavement. So making this change really has risen as a priority for me, particularly on that road. And if we have the funds, I'd really like to restore the project to its original scope and get the best for the best product for the investment that we're about to make.
Talk a little bit about Lifesaver Investment, the way we talked about.
Yeah, so like I was saying, the added funds for this project will extend the life of the road 5 to 7 years. So instead of having to come back in, say, 12 to 15 years and have to reconstruct the road, and the town had looking at another $1 million project after already investing $1 million 15 to 20 years ago, this would give you an opportunity in 15 to 20 years with a new subbase to do preservation paving like we've been working toward. So instead of $1 million, you probably spend 100,000 and gain another 5 to 7, 10, even 12 years. So for the additional $250,000, you essentially, and if you add the overlay costs in 12 to 15 years, you essentially over the next 30 years save yourself $1 million on the investment.
Rob, we have a contractor already,
Yes,
and we negotiated with that contractor to reduce the scope of the project.
correct.
And now we're hoping that that contractor will provide the original scope at the original price.
So they've already indicated they will not provide, they can't go back to the same prices that they bid
Okay.
in 2020, given labor and fuel
Yep.
costs today. But they have provided us with a pretty reasonable price increase. It's about $20,000 more than their original deduction for what they cost, the original deduction that they proposed. So I think that we're going to be able to I'm confident we're going to be able to successfully negotiate the change within the limits of that budget.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
So is the condition of Chapel, is that an anomaly or do we have more roads like that in Orono that will have to be rebuilt from the ground up? Literally?
Well, we've been working our way. I think you may recall when we had the conversation about the bond in the
Right.
beginning. We've been working our way through some of the hot spots, some of the more significant need. North Main Avenue was one.
Yeah.
Essex Street is where I started in 2008. And we just did a preservation paving project on Essex Street. So that project is going to be, because we did a good investment in the beginning,
Right.
we're gonna get 30 years out of that road with just another, overlay on it. So we're getting to the bottom of that list of
Okay.
significant infrastructure reconstruction on local roads. Doesn't solve the problem. The biggest issue that we have right now is drainage and old, particularly when you get into corrugated metal pipe all over town, that's seeing some pretty significant corrosion. That's kind of like the sleeping, ticking time bomb underlying everything, but it's getting much better. And you'll find, so if you look at the CIP right now, we're looking at, even before I started here, the big investment that was made in the sailor development. That project was a significant investment the town made. Did it the right way. It was a reconstruction. And so we're looking at basic overlays, preservation pavement overlays for that area, instead of having to look at significant investment to rebuild something that you just let crumble through. Don't get me wrong, there's everything on the list needs to be done. But I do feel like, particularly given this this bond investment, I'm starting to see the light, I guess, on the other end of the tunnel at some time. And then I remember all the things that we need to do. The light did. But, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Does this, I assume, just applies to Chapel and College Heights?
Chapel,
Because North Main's done.
North
right?
Main's
Because
done, yep.
250 doesn't get you back to 1.5, obviously, so.
No.
Right.
That covers it because it's only that. So we did it that way, North Main, without the
Yes.
complete redo.
Yeah.
And so the idea is now that we've got this 250, put it in here and do those streets the proper way that you interacted to initially. Gotcha.
I just want to highlight that Rob talked about preservation pavement, which means if we're running our system correctly, we'll have those overlays on roads that do not have big gaping holes in them. And it's not because we're doing it too fast, it's because ultimately we'll save the town money over the long term.
It allows you to extend the lifespan of the infrastructure with a smaller investment, at a smaller investment level.
I'm not typically a kick the cane person. I don't like doing that.
Other questions or comments? We ready for vote? All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you, Rob. And item 2291, order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Sebago Technics of South Portland, Maine for engineering services related to the Webster Neighborhood Traffic and Pedestrian Study, Safety Study, and further to reallocate $9,000 remaining in the Water Street Capital Infrastructure Project to fund this study. Sophie, this is you, I guess.
Maybe,
And a motion, yeah, motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second?
So, before Rob talks about the specifics to this project, I want to just kind of put some background in place, and that is in December, staff met and Councilor Wingard met, Councilor Gardner met with about 30 people from the Webster neighborhood to talk about concerns that they had related to their neighborhood. I reported back to town council around the specifics of those concerns, but they kind of fell into a couple of buckets. Behavior was one of them, and maintenance of town property was another one. And then I think the last bucket was really around infrastructure. Specifically, they were very concerned about speeding traffic. They were concerned about streetlights or not having enough streetlights. They were concerned about sidewalks not being there. And a lot around pedestrian safety. So some of what we've been able to do working with code enforcement around some of the behaviors that get to some of the pedestrian safety and sidewalk issues. We've been working through that. But when I went to Rob and said, so Rob, here is this plethora of ideas. Tell me, give me your recommendation. He gave me that look that said, boss, you're asking for the impossible. So when we pared it down, the first step that we came to was this idea of getting some study to understand the actual issue and potential solutions. And I'm gonna turn it over for you to talk about what this will look like.
Yeah, I see this as an opportunity to have a professional traffic engineer assess the neighborhood, get a strong understanding of what is existing. And there are so many options for, there's all kinds of different ways to solve problems, right? And so I am interested in getting somebody else's opinion on how traffic calming can be achieved without having big impacts on other modes of transportation, and what options are out there. There's 3 or 4 different ways you can build a crosswalk. What's the best way to build that crosswalk in this neighborhood? Where should they go? Do we need them, at all? This is some of the stuff that we'll be looking at through the study. Taking into account, first thing will happen is they'll come do a site visit, meet with town staff. We'll talk about the neighborhood meetings that we had, get all of that input included in the assessment. Then they'll go out and look at the physical conditions in the neighborhood, and then provide us with a plan. So this will help us get beyond just here's some good ideas, but actually provide us with a plan that we can share with the community to get their opinions on whether they think some of this would work, some of it isn't necessary. And ultimately, if town council is going to be deciding to make some investments in making improvements to this neighborhood, having this study to back up those decisions, I think is a really good idea. So the deliverables will be a concept level plan with concept level, order of magnitude estimates for projects that we could do, and perhaps some ways that we could think about phasing them in the most effective way.
Thank you, Rob. Questions or comments on this item?
As a former resident of that neighborhood, I think this is a great idea because there is this very concrete, solidified, common understanding of what the problems are or what the traffic, specifically what the traffic issues are in that neighborhood, but without kind of actual data to back that up. And so I think the study provides a really good opportunity to either A, see exactly what it is that residents are experiencing, or B, be able to dig into the question, why is this the perception of what it's like to live in this neighborhood if the traffic pattern isn't matching what people are saying? And so to me, this is a really great opportunity to make some changes potentially that might impact that neighborhood in a positive way.
I think it's really important too, that the time of year that they do this.
Yes.
So right now, probably would be a good time of year because most of the students have vacated, but when they're in full swing, yeah, I lived over there too for years.
I'm just curious about, when I think of Webster side, I don't think of traffic problems.
Oh, gosh. I was almost killed by a woman who ran a stop sign while I was walking Ella when she was like 6 months old, walking her across the street. This lady blew through the stop sign and almost killed us. And that was not an unusual occurrence.
Yeah.
There's
a
And I
hill
know
there
those are
too,
all, those are all.
There's a hill there too, that if you go fast enough, you could you can get air.
Yep.
But you just go right up
By
there and just land on all
the
four
tractors.
tires.
You're convinced me,
Not me, not me.
But I think the focus will be more on how we can make improvements for bike and pedestrian safety and introduce traffic calming efforts. When we say traffic calming, we're talking about slowing speeds down, highlighting key areas. So like we were talking about the flashing crosswalk sign.
Mhm.
So how do we make pedestrians and bicyclists more visible? The other parts, other changes the infrastructure that we can make to help drivers be more aware, make them more aware of key, dangerous areas, those sorts of things.
Like all of Crosby really doesn't have a sidewalk, correct?
It does not.
Yeah, because we walk over there pretty frequently. And I just thought of it as you were talking, which I guess, but we walk in the morning or in the evening, like we might see 3 cars. That's why the traffic over there doesn't mean, I think when I think of traffic problems, I think of busy, congested, and I've never seen it over there. Now, is someone gonna run a stop sign?
Yes,
Yeah.
every day of the week.
Yeah, well, and those,
Schools and special.
there are 4 new stop signs where there never were stop signs, which is kind of messes with your head a little bit too, I think, but here's 3. But anyway, okay.
Any other comments?
But I really like the idea. I'm glad we're responding to what we heard at that meeting. I'd love to, this maybe a Sophie thing or Bell thing, to have this however we disseminate news to the community, have it shared that way so that people don't think that this is an attempt to stall change, but that this is a step to really respond to what we heard.
Anything else? We're ready for a vote on this order. All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. Okay, order 22-92. Order authorizing the purchase of UV lamps from UV Superstore in the amount of $12,224, and further authorizing the purchase of additional replacement bulbs up to $1,916, not to exceed the total budget amount of $14,140 as approved in the FY22 WPCF capital budget with funds drawn from the WPCF capital reserve account. Motion to approve. And a second. Second, by Megan.
So.
Chris, is that you?
Yes, I sent out a little narrative description, you might have seen, I'm sure you've read it.
In the background?
Just to recap that, we use UV light to disinfect, that's required in our state discharge license. And they wear out. We're fortunate in Orono to get 7 years out of 7 lights. Most of that's because we disinfect seasonal, so 6 months a year we don't use them. And we have redundancy, so 1 bank is enough to disinfect. We have 2 banks. One is just a backup. So we alternate those and we get good longevity out of our lamps because of that. I do want to mention that we're in a license year right now, and I've already been told that they're going to increase disinfection season on us in our new license. So it's going to be 30 days on both ends. So we're going to have to start 30 days earlier and end 30 days later.
So that would be April through November.
It will, yeah. Right now it's May through October. The reason behind that is climate change. The reason we do seasonal is because the river's not being used for recreation in the winter. It's iced over, people aren't boating, they're not fishing, they're not swimming. Climate change shows that the river freezes later in the season, so boats are on it longer. And the ice melt is sooner. So happens on the other end.
It's interesting. That because it's frozen, people aren't using it. We put
Well,
it in.
they used to disinfect year round.
Yeah.
And everybody used chlorine. Chlorine's not good for the aquatic life. So they decided to go seasonal when people weren't using the river. But obviously, when they're using it, you need to disinfect, make the discharge safe.
I think the discharge needed to be safe all the time.
Well, to be honest with you, the chlorine's worse
Yeah,
for the life in the river.
right.
So that's why that decision was made.
And that was a state level decision.
The state usually adopts their regulation from EPA. They have to abide By their standards at least, they can make them more stringent, but they can't make them less.
Questions for Chris? Pretty straightforward. Got to have the lights.
Have the lights. A lot of money for light bulbs, but.
Ready for vote? All those in favor of approving order 2292? 7 in favor and none opposed. Thank you, Chris.
And you notice we dropped Chris right in the soup, that he comes on as superintendent in January, and he's dealing with a license renewal and a septic renewal right now, so he's doing a great job.
Okay, that concludes our new business, and we'll move on to council committee representative reports. Do we have any this evening?
I do.
Did you say you don't?
I do.
Okay, Cheryl,
Am I
right?
the only one?
I think so.
Oh, okay, good. So we met, April 27th, the environment committee meeting was April 27th. And at this meeting, we did a few things. We had a presentation from a UMaine student group, who I have worked with, one of Tim Waring's groups, about recycling at the 3 big complexes, and the students were very interested in Orono's response to students having access to recycling. So, so they did some research, they collected some data, and they presented to the Environment Committee about their findings, and they decided that students, if given the opportunity, the big find was that they would recycle. So we talked about having that be a basis for discussion, for future discussion for council about how we can include more of our student population in a recycling program for us. Belle and Megan did a MS4 program or overview for the Environment Committee, which council has already had. And we started talking about the Community Resiliency Grant, which was a Weatherize Orono campaign that we're going to start talking about at our next meeting in May. So we are planning for the future, and we are engaging with the students at the university and continuing our environmental efforts.
Good, thanks. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other reports? Your question?
Question, I don't know if it's for Sophie or you or Cheryl. Was there ever a time when people paid, you get paid for your recycling stuff or no?
So
Am I
I'm gonna
making that up?
step in the middle of Rob's stuff, but there was a time when the town did a single sort recycling, where there were avenues, sorted recycling, not single sort, but sorted, and we collect it. And there have been times when the market would allow you to get money. In order to really take advantage of that, you would have had to have baling equipment. Size is important. We went to a single sort recycling when the market was good. Tipping didn't cost us anything. The market has gone away. And so the recycling tip fee to process recycling has gone way up, and loads getting rejected that are recycling loads has also gone way up, because the tolerance has dropped to about a 5% dirty level. Whereas before, some of the stuff that was getting recycled overseas was just like MSW. And those overseas outlets said no more. So the industry is on a big reset right now, Leo.
And it was more for these, so for these big developments, there's no opportunity. I mean, that's going to be just an outright cost to incorporate a program like that.
So, right, and I mean, unless we as a group or as a council, or, you know, as if we can find a way to kind of ameliorate some of that cost, it's a conversation for sure that we just
So
haven't dealt with yet.
I would just want to be clear, though, that the town offers recycling to residents with units of 4 or less. That is part of the tax cost of taxes. more than 4 and commercial entities are required to deal with their own. So we have some that have entered into arrangements with the same company that we've entered into arrangements with to deal with recycling. The big 3 residential complexes keep coming up as the town needs to do something for them. When they went before the planning board, they had to have a plan for their municipal solid waste. Recycling is an offshoot of that. Now there is more of a push for the town to step in. I would argue if the town's going to step in there, the town would need to step in to all, and that cost would be enormous. We're not talking about a few $1,000s. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for that.
Thanks.
Any other reports? I don't believe we've had any other reports.
The only thing I would follow up with what Cheryl said is the Street and Stream cleanup event is
Right.
May 21st at 9 a.m. It's on Zoom this year. Please log in. We need people to log in. We need participation for our EPA, for our DEP permit.
What do you mean it's on Zoom? How can you
Sophie's
fix
gonna
that
have a
up when you're on
GoPro
Zoom?
on her forehead.
No, not me, Belle.
So it's a virtual event that you pre-register for. You can pre-register for online. Megan, our environmental services coordinator, is handling that. Megan has. So you pre-register, you'll get you a package of supplies that you need, of buckets and bags, gloves, traffic vests to be safe, things like that, ahead of time. And then you go out on that day, or really any day that you decide you want to do it before then. But the Zoom meeting is the education and outreach portion of the event. So a big part of the event, the community engagement, is getting people more aware of stormwater pollutants, how stormwater works, those sorts of things. And so there's a presentation that Megan will be doing to help people understand how stormwater works in Orono and in Maine. And so that's the online part. And then
You still have to
for
actually.
Well, my
participating,
vision of virtual cleanup is I can sit in my house and do it. So
Yeah.
that's not how it
Not
works.
quite, yeah, sorry.
I do have a question. So I love pickup trash. No, I love, like we do it every year anyway. But can we have kind of like a watch party? So I register one Zoom account and then I have, my kids who I draft to pick up trash as well. Will they count if they are not?
Yeah, so
Oh, here comes the boss right now.
the numbers will actually come from pre-registered
Okay, perfect.
groups. So that's the important part.
So we have lots of neighborhoods who have done this before, and one of the things that they have done is they have a watch party out on the lawn, and there's donuts and coffee and kind of good-natured get together for that piece, and then they go out and they pick up. One of the great things about doing it as a virtual cleanup is that you're able to choose your own route, so you can pick up a section of town that is near and dear to your heart, rather than when we do it centrally located from the council chambers. We always have to choose routes that are walkable from council chambers. So last year we actually had 130 plus people participate, and I didn't actually calculate the number of miles that were picked up. I probably should have, but it was significantly more than we've been able to pick up in years past.
Thanks, Bill.
The benefit of doing it on that day is that we'll have staff going around picking up the bags that you collect. So it's a little bit easier to get rid of that trash that you do collect if you do it that day.
Any other questions on this item?
Did you say it's required that we have a certain amount of engagement for fulfilling something? Could you say that again?
So we've got the municipal separated storm sewer system permit, the federal permit. And as part of that permit, there is a whole education and outreach component, or MCL.
Minimum control measures 1 and 2 require that So there are 6 minimum control measures as part of the permit. 1 and 2 require different types of community involvement, education and outreach, to get the message out to the community to help encourage compliance. And so this event is a key part of our education and outreach effort.
And if you notice, when you walk back down the stairs to leave, when you think you're at the end of the stairs, look, and you will see the winning posters from our student poster contest. We actually print those, we scan them in and have them printed as posters to announce the event around town. But in order to get that far, Megan went in and taught students about stormwater, and these are the posters that came. I was fortunate to be, I'm always fortunate to be one of the people that gets to judge that poster contest. But that's a piece of it, and you'll kind of see we roll out pieces of that education. There will have different types of infrastructure announcements. So like for a while out in front of Town Hall, by where the seating arrangement is, by in between the 2 buildings, there was a beautiful picture that somebody actually freehand painted, telling people that it was a storm drain. You had to be careful because the fish were going to get your trash if you put it there. We've had discs that we've put out. So that's all part of the education and outreach piece. The other piece that is a significant investment from the town is our $250,000 back truck and the staff time that goes into cleaning out all of the catch basins and inspecting all of our catch basins every single year. The the MS4 permit compliance costs us about $20,000 a year. And I would say we do it in a way that we hope makes the biggest difference in the community to the actual footprint on the face of the earth, but efficiently.
I was only asking just to make sure it sounds like we're doing plenty of effort to get lots of people involved.
We try, but anything that you can do to help, that's one of the roles that council has, is when you start seeing stuff come out on Facebook, you know more people than we know. We're kind of boring. And so the more you can do to help amp the event, the better it is, the more places people can see it.
Where do residents find the website or the link to register for this?
So it's in the environmental services tab on the town website.
Okay, thank you. Great. Anything else on this? Okay, moving on to future agenda items of concern. We have a pretty busy schedule for the next month. So nothing to add to that. That's good. Public petitions, I assume we have none.
I think we have a public comment.
Yeah.
Public comment.
Yes, come
Well,
on.
we're just ready to have public comments. Please identify yourself.
I'm gonna take this off because otherwise it'll sound more like mumbling. My name is John Schuster, and I live in Longfellow Heights. And I want to give someone my address and contact information here.
Thank you.
What are your names?
I'm Sophie. This is Nancy.
Your names. I told you this one.
Yes.
So,
You're welcome to sit if you'd like, but if you want to stand, that's
I'd
fine.
rather stand. I'm a stander.
Okay.
It's more comfortable for me. What I'm bringing forth here is an idea, and it's an idea for a collaboration between the community and myself and some others. And the collaboration would be for an artisan gallery in downtown Orono here, which would involve people in the community of all ages. I'm sure that some of you, if not all of you, have been in the rock shop in Bangor and seeing different nooks and crannies, there's nice bowls, or there's nice jewelry here. It's sort of a catch-all for that kind of thing. And that's what I envision to have in a place like that. Of course, visual arts also, but also an active participation in the community, and hopefully have people that are artisans have space for them, and have a glass wall with door on that side, a hallway, so people can see what they're doing, and the possibility of people learning and mentoring those things. Not only a place that looks good, people want to come in, but also people in the community want to come in and see what's going on, and show the art that's going on at the elementary schools, and have that up on sort of maybe a 6-month basis, depending on what's coming out of the schools. That's basically my vision. So what have I done so far? Well, primary to this kind of idea is there a space? I'm turned around here. Is there a space over there somewhere? I didn't want the space right here on Main Street because it's not as accessible to people to get up and around. And I sort of wanted it back on Mill Street area, somewhere in there. And there's quite a few places that are open, and I've inquired. One of the places was owned by Lynn White, and he's not really interested in that idea. The other place that seems like would be a great place is what used to be the Mediterranean Bazaar Marketplace. But I don't know who owns that, and every time I go over there, of course, it's closed, it's locked. I go upstairs to the door, I knock on the door upstairs thinking maybe they would know, but there's no answer at that door either. So I guess I'm reaching out to you for ideas for that also. As far as money, it was primary in this to be successful is to look for grants. And I looked through to see what kind of grants were available for this kind of thing. The kind of grant that seems really appropriate is to have a grant that involves the community as well. And that would be the one that I focused in on was the National Endowment for the Arts. And that's a grant that the city would have to work with myself in doing that, because they don't give the money to just the person or the group. It has to be in coordination with the community. And I think that would be a healthy thing if the community is interested in that kind of thing. For those of you that remember, there used to be a place under the nest where the plant shop used to be. I talked to that person at length. Does anyone here remember when there was a gallery down there?
It's Crusader.
The format was a little bit different than what I'm looking to do, and certainly bigger than the space down there. So are there any questions on that, what I presented so far? Okay.
So I would suggest, and Mitch nodded when I looked at him, that we have a staff person whose job it is to work with people to try to understand the business plan and figure out how the town can collaborate and what options might be there. So I really think the next step would be for you to hand Mitch one of your business cards
Okay.
and let him be in touch with you.
All right, thanks. If you would send me an email, or you're gonna give me a card.
I'm surprised Mitch has cards.
I'm gonna leave it, from here, I'm gonna leave it in your court to just kind of discuss it and see if you think the community would be interested in this.
Yeah.
And then there's steps I have to take to see if the money is available for that kind of thing. And if you have an idea, if you know some of the owners of property down on Mill Street.
That's certainly information we can provide.
So I would suggest the next step would be for you and Mitch to meet, and then for Mitch to report back in one of our June or July committees, probably community development, if that works for you, Jeff.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have that. We'll put it on the agenda. for
Yep,
the meeting.
and that way we can have an update and move from there, okay?
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Always.
Bringing an idea
Thanks so much
forward.
for the creative ideas. Nice to
Appreciate
meet you.
Very interesting. Any other public comments, Bill? Online?
Nothing showing.
Okay,
Tom?
yes.
Can I interrupt just long enough to say that not only can you sign up for the street and stream cleanup through the environmental tab, environmental services tab, if that's a little bit too far to go, it's right on one of our initial buttons on the front website on the homepage. And also along with the no ticket landfill weekend, we also have curbside leaf and brush cleanup through May 20th. And not to let people forget that you can take brush and leaves to the landfill with a sticker and no tickets anytime, if you'd like to. So if our schedule doesn't work for you, you still have a place to take your stuff.
Anytime when they are open. on
Yes, of
Wednesday or
course.
Saturday.
Wednesdays and Saturdays, yes.
So ongoing right now, drag your stuff to the curb.
Yeah.
Pick up. Okay.
I'll let Carl know.
No, just stop.
Just leave the brush.
And brush is brush. Brush is not logs. Brush is brush,
It's not trees.
not trees.
And it's not a pile as big as a 10-wheeler.
No, it's, what did we say, 4x4x8, 4x4?
6x12.
There, I was totally wrong, 6x12.
It's pretty big.
Just say some numbers. It's fine.
Nice. Okay, we have an executive session planned. We will need to come back into public session after that to take action on order 2293. And at that point, we'll make a decision on the workshop. I think we can do.
Yep,
after the executive session.
for logistics here, we are gonna turn off the video and the microphones. And I'm gonna call Jeff Lowe on my cell phone for speaker. And that's how we'll have the executive session. Belle's gonna confirm with me that she can't hear us. If we could take just 2 minutes to, like a break for people to
Yeah,
go to
well,
the
let's
bathroom.
take the motion to go into executive session first, and then we'll take our break. So I need a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D to discuss collective bargaining negotiations with IAFF Local 3106 and Maine Association of Police Orono Unit. Move to approve. Second. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Now we'll take our break.
7:30.
And we have, I gotta go back to the order. Is 2293. An order ratifying the agreement between the town of Orono and the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, Local 3106, from July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2024, and authorizing the council chair and manager to sign. Motion to approve, please.
Move approval?
And a second? Second from Sonia, thank you. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
All those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. At 7:30, I am not ready to go into a workshop. I anticipate that this is about when we'd end. And we talked about rescheduling the first workshop session to a date in June so that we won't change the entire schedule.
Okay.
So Thursday, we will be discussing
Next Monday.
next Monday.
Next
Okay.
Monday, we are gonna be discussing community
That's
services.
right.
Wait, community development. Let me,
There's
Well,
no-
we
there's nothing in here.
Oh, wait, let me look.
Section.
Yeah. Give me just a second, Tom.
I wondered why, but I wasn't gonna complain about it.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was looking at Rob's eyes. Yes, the next meeting is community development, code planning, economic development, assessing, parks and recreation, and the library. So we've got.
So
All right,
Why-
so that doesn't fall under one of the main tabs of our binder. That's a little bit
That,
here.
so that would be community development
Yeah.
plus community services or public services. So those two tabs. Facilities are part of the services one.
Mhm.
You'll talk with Rob because they now fall under public works.
Cool.
Leo, you had a question.
yeah, why would we not just start where we were going to start next Monday? I'm confused at why we would skip that and go, if that was our, I don't know why we started to begin with,
So-
although it is at the beginning.
So 100% of the reason why the order is the way it is, I simply follow the chart of accounts and break it out into reasonable groups. There have been years that we've done public safety first. We've
So
kind of been all over
I think
the,
Leo's question was,
why
why
not?
don't we do general government on Monday?
Because I have my whole staff lined up around
And-
vacations and other things.
And we've
They got
advertised.
this list, so we'll just bump that to the bottom.
And to be honest, general government is usually pretty
Straightforward.
straightforward. It's not,
So.
unless this is the year that you
Well, this
decided
is the
to.
year, there's some funky things in general government, but I also have another document that I'm working on. I had too fun of a time this weekend to get it done. But Leo has asked for a little bit more in-depth around the differences in departments, and normally we go through the difference year over year to get to that 900,000 mark. Most of the time, we do that as we go through each section. I'm pulling that together in one master document. If I don't have it out this week, I'll have it for you on Monday.
Any further business to come before the group tonight? Then a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
And a second. Second, all those in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. We just have some things to sign. So